630 WLAP.
Joining me now in studio on News Radio 630 WLAP, Phil Moffett, who is a Republican candidate for governor. And Phil, you started your candidacy right there in that chair right there.
Yes, I did. And in July of last year, I sat here and you peppered us with questions to get us off the ground.
I've got a few more for you. Let's start with how, first of all, the campaign is going. What do you sense out there as you travel around the state?
Well, we get a great response from the people that we're in front of, and we're very happy with that. When they hear about our Four Corners platform, which has a lot to do with making state government smaller, more efficient, and spending less, which are, of course, all Tea Party principles, that we get a great response, and we're just going to keep pushing hard for the next 22 days.
Explain the Four Corners program. What are you talking about when you say that?
They are the four things that Mike Harmon and I will accomplish in our first term of 4 years, and the one is using the state sovereignty that's granted to us in the 9th and 10th Amendments of the U.S. Constitution to fight back against things like Obamacare and unconstitutional law and regulation that comes from the EPA and the FDA and all the other three-letter acronyms out there. The second corner of the platforms is about creating jobs in Kentucky by reforming our tax code to a consumption tax, a retail sales tax, and eliminating income taxes on individuals and businesses.
Let me stop you there because my radar goes off when I hear people talk about consumption taxes, because I love the plan of eliminating Kentucky's income tax and going to a sales tax. What have you found how do you sell that plan to the average Kentuckian? What's the advantage to that plan?
The advantage to that plan is that states that have converted to consumption taxes primarily and away from personal and corporate income taxes are the most prosperous states in the nation. I hold up Tennessee, Texas, Florida, Nevada, even Alaska as good examples of those. And we need to mimic their actions. Governor Rick Perry was in Kentucky a couple of weekends ago to address the Republicans at the statewide Lincoln Day dinner, and he said it as a joke, but it really wasn't much of a joke. He said that, if we don't convert to a consumption tax and get away from income taxes, he'll open an office in Kentucky and take the rest of our job. Which was
he might actually do that, though.
Well, that's what I said. It really was a backhanded threat, because in 2008, Texas accounted for 71% of all the new jobs created in America.
Yeah.
So he's not kidding when he's getting all the new jobs, and he has no. He's brazen enough to take the rest of them.
Here's what happens when we start talking about a consumption tax. People start freaking out saying, well, I've never paid taxes on these services before. What about my medicine and my gas, or my medicine and my groceries, et cetera? How does your plan approach that issue?
Well, you have to think of it in two ways. One is that consumers pay all taxes. So embedded in that cost of your food, or embedded in the cost of that medicine, are the taxes of the companies and the pharmacists that you get those products from. So you're paying the taxes, you just can't see them. And what we're doing with the sales taxes is taking those hidden taxes out and placing it as a sales tax that you can see. Now, the most common complaint about a sales tax is that it is regressive, that it hurts low-income people more than it hurts higher-income people. But the reality in Kentucky has been this. Under our tax code, we don't have a lot of jobs. Job creation has never been big around here. So which is more regressive? Having our current state tax system and bread 10 cents less a loaf, or would you rather pay 10 cents more for a loaf of bread and have a lot of job opportunities?
Right.
And to me, that question answers itself.
Does your consumption tax, would it actually go ahead and tax groceries and medicine?
It would.
Okay.
It would. We tax a lot of foods now, which people don't understand, that prepared foods and candies and sodas are taxed.
Right.
But unprepared foods are not.
Well, let's dive into that just a little bit, and then I'll let you get back to the Four Corners thing. What is the revenue difference there? Because Bill Farmer's done the math on an almost the exact same plan, only his would exempt groceries and would exempt medicines. By not exempting anything and going across the board and saying everything you consume is going to have a small tax on it, what then is your effective sales tax rate, number one? And number two, what does that do to the state's revenue? Is it revenue neutral, or is it revenue positive for the state?
Well, the intent is to be revenue neutral. Currently, our general fund, through the taxes, fees, and surcharges, brings in about $8.2 billion a year. and then there's an additional $300 million from the lottery. So we set that aside. We're looking to replace the $8.2 billion. I've worked with Dr. John Guerin at the University of Kentucky on trying to establish what a reasonable rate would be if we have it expanded across all goods and services at the retail level. And that rate can be somewhere between 7.1 and 7.2% to reach revenue neutrality.
Okay, the math doesn't add up there from what I've talked to Bill Farmer about, so I'm going to challenge you on this, because Bill Farmer says we can exempt groceries and medicine and have a 5.5% sales tax, and that it's revenue positive. Where's the disconnect?
I don't know. I haven't looked at Bill Farmer's plan in that depth. I know that Dr. Guerin has talked to Bill Farmer in depth about their plans, and I take John.
And I respect John Guerin, by the way. He's a great economist at the University of Kentucky. I'm not challenging that his math is not good. Believe me, I would not win any math contests with probably fourth graders. But seriously, I want to try to figure out where that disconnect is, because it seems to me, if we could get it lower than 7.1, which, by the way, is still, isn't that lower than Tennessee, even if it was 7.1%?
Tennessee's at about 8.25%, and then their local governments can actually add sales taxes to the.
How would you protect from that tax being increased over time? Because that's another big concern that people have about a consumption tax, is that, they'll just keep raising it, like Tennessee has done. I think Tennessee started at 6. They've been as high as 9. They're now at 8. What? That's
right, and I believe they're at about 8.25 currently. And what I would do is, within the law, and we would have to replace the current taxes with this new sales tax in a flash cut, if you will.
Correct.
Because you can't have them coexist, because one would never go away.
Right.
But what I would like to do is, if they want to raise the rate, they would have to come to the public and get a majority vote from the public.
So it would require a referendum by the state in order to raise that rate.
That's correct. It would require a vote by the voting public to raise that rate.
51% of Kentuckians would have to agree to have their sales tax rate.
51% of the people that vote, which, of course, we know aren't all Kentuckians. So, but it would have to pass the House and the Senate, and the governor would have to approve it, and it would have to go to a vote of the popular vote.
So 3-4 hurdles.
That's right.
Okay.
And now they could lower the rate at any time.
Yeah.
And that wouldn't require any popular vote for that.
Okay. All right. So let's go on to the rest of your four corners.
The third corner of the platform is education. We have a failed business model in education where a third of our kids drop out before they graduate. And of those that do graduate, 60% of them can't read and do math at grade level. And what I want to do is put accountability, discipline, and parental involvement back in the system. And the three ways that we want to do that is make superintendents accountable for everything that happens in their district. But to hold them accountable, we need to allow them to manage their budgets, personnel, and curriculum as they see fit to manage their kids. And at the classroom level, it's just the fact that kids don't learn unless they submit to their teachers, and we don't require kids to behave in public schools anymore. And I want to give teachers and principals the dignity and respect to kick chronically disruptive kids out of class or even out of school if necessary if they won't behave, because they need to learn their actions have consequences in elementary school.
So you would not have agreed with the law they tried to pass, and I don't remember what the fate of it finally was. I think it failed ultimately, but to raise the dropout age. I was against the dropout law because I thought, you don't really want kids in school that absolutely don't want to be there. They become disruptors. There should be, at some point, you should be able to cut them loose.
Well, the reality is today that most of the dropouts are in the 8th and 9th grades, which means they're dropping out before they're 16.
Right.
So to raise the age to 18 really means nothing.
Yeah.
And I happen to have a younger and older brother that both dropped out of school, one in the 8th and one in the 9th grades. And I agree with you. There isn't enough resources in the world to catch them when they were young and make them go to school.
Right.
And if they were in school, you wouldn't want them there anyway. They would be as disruptive as they'd have to be to get kicked out.
Right. Now,
so it's not a good law.
You would be what's your position on school choice, et cetera, with regards to education?
Well, that's how we get parents more involved. If we can make them consumers of public education, they'll become more involved in the process. And what I want to do is give them public school choice, meaning if their child isn't doing well in a public school, they should be able to pull them out of that school and move them to any other public school, regardless of district, until they find a school where they're happy. And we also need public charter schools, which in states that have done good jobs with their laws in terms of allowing these charter schools to be as innovative as possible, they do the best job of catching the kids that have fallen the farthest behind. And introducing those two things introduces competition to the public school systems for the first time. And that over time will improve quality and lower costs. And we saw that in Florida. Actually, 13 years ago, Florida was ranked 48th in the nation in public education, and they introduced 4 different competitive models that allowed parents to pick schools, essentially, and they rose from 48th to 10th in just 13 years. So free market forces work in public education if we'll let them.
That would bring us to your fourth point,
which is debt and the economy. And in the year 2000, when one of my opponents became Senate president, we had about $3 billion worth of debt in this state. And in just 10 years, that has gone to $44 billion. And the increases come primarily through our underfunded state employee pension plan. And we have to stop that and convert that plan to a defined contribution plan as opposed to a defined benefits plan, and do that as quickly as possible. And we need to get back to common sense budgeting, which for me as a businessman means you don't spend more money than you bring in, and you don't spend it before you have it. And we have failed in that regard, not only at the state level but the federal level, and that's why we're in so much debt.
Phil Moffett is our guest. He's a Republican candidate for governor. Let me bring this issue up. One of your opponents, you were challenging them on that debt issue, and he challenged you on the debt of your campaign. How do you answer that?
Well, it's interesting that he even had access to that information, because back in December or early January, when we filed our initial financing report, we had a problem with a corrupt file. So we did a test filing this last round, which was due at I believe it was on the 15th or the 18th of April. So we filed a test file to see if we could get one through without it being corrupt, and it wasn't our finished product. And he got a hold of that information and said that we were overdrawn in our account, which is not true. We've had a positive cash position all the way through the campaign and remain in a positive cash position.
Let's talk about energy. This has also been another thing that's been a big concern for, I think, Kentuckians in general. One of the few advantages we have over other states is the cheaper energy costs. As governor, you've already decided that if you were to be elected, you'd pick a fight with Obama on Obamacare. What about the EPA?
They're going to be one of the first groups I go after, because, frankly, they're trying to kill the coal industry, and specifically the Eastern Kentucky coal industry. And they're being the EPA has had their effect. And I know that LG&E and KU announced that they're going to start moving away from coal-fired power plants and go into natural gas, because
like 5 years.
They can't stand the regulation and the harassment that they get from the EPA on the coal-fired plants.
Yeah.
And we need to fight these guys back. They are trying to kill one of the most efficient and low-cost energy sources in this nation, and they're doing it on purpose because they want these alternative energies to be more competitive by collapsing markets that exist today and that are very trustworthy. And we'll take that fight on immediately.
What about alternative energy? Are there some areas that Kentucky could contribute to, the idea of finding alternative energy?
Well, I have no problem with alternative energy at all, but it needs to be able to compete in an open market scenario. What's going on with the Obama administration is they want to kill away current legitimate markets just so that those fledgling markets will get a foothold, and they're more expensive and less efficient. So I'm all for renewable energy of any kind. I would love to see, industrial hemp grown in this state so that we can, you can use it as a biofuel. And
I understand you can actually get petroleum out of hemp. Like there's the equivalent, if you will, of a barrel of oil with every acre that you grow.
Well, it's an oil-rich plant,
right? Yeah.
And it we need to get that back on Kentucky farms for a number of reasons, but one of them would be as a renewable energy source, and free up some of the farmland for for more edible corn, so that we don't starve half the world while we gas up our cars.
Agreed. Phil Moffett is a Republican candidate for governor. And we appreciate your time today. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you, Leland.
News Radio 630 WLAP.